we've been talking about the life of David. Anybody remember that? We're on sermon number 10. You missed it wasn't last week, it was the week before I went to Africa. We talked about Jonathan. You missed that. And so we've been talking about the life of David, and I think we're finding some good stuff in here. We really begin to talk. Go ahead and turn to chapter 18, because we really began to talk some about. I didn't really finish chapter 18 last time, so I'm going to do it this time. We began to talk some about David as he defeats Goliath, and he's entering this new season in his life. It's a new season of popularity. And so you're seeing in chapter 18, you see there where the women come singing songs in the streets. That's probably what Joy will do when I get there tomorrow, singing songs in the streets for me. And they're singing, and David is experiencing this popularity that really is way beyond anything we would know. And they say, Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his 10,000s. He's experiencing this kind of popularity and favor. Saul puts him, and it says early in the chapter, it says that he sets him over all the men of war of Israel. So he gets this position of authority, and then he finds his bromance with Jonathan. And so it's like everything is going his way, man. It's this new season, and he's really kind of rising into his own. But we also learned, we talked last time, we learned that generally there's two things that come alongside popularity and a season of blessing and prosperity. You remember what we said they were? Well, you don't remember, so I'll tell you. One is, the first one was that's the second one I was going to mention. The first one, we call it the pressure of praise. Like we're not, without really adequate preparation from the Lord, like we're really not able to, our head gets blown up. We're not able to accept it. David had this adequate preparation from the Lord, and so the pressure of this popularity and the pressure of this prosperity in the season of his life, he endured that. The thing he did not avoid was the second one we mentioned, and that was alongside a season. I tell you, I really think that as I'm reading through this stuff, I'm seeing it in my own life. I bet you maybe you can see it in yours. Alongside this season of his life where there's prosperity and popularity, and man, things are really clicking and things are moving. The other thing that comes alongside that is jealousy. And so that's what happens with Saul. Saul, as they sing that Saul's killed his thousands and David has killed his 10,000s, Saul's not real excited about that, And so alongside this, we talked about that, alongside this season of prosperity and popularity comes this jealousy, and we talked about that. So here we are now in chapter 18. He's enjoying this prosperity. However, Saul allowing jealousy to cover his vision until ultimately, look here in verse 11, ultimately he attempts to kill David. And so it says in verse 11, Saul hurled the spear, for he thought, I will pin David to the wall. Like, I don't think he meant, it's not playing, pin the tail on the donkey here. I think he was after him, he wants to kill him, right? And so he says, I will pin David to the wall. But David escaped from his presence twice. And so what I want to talk about a little bit tonight is this. We talked about David, and we've seen his life. We've seen that he was able to find God in Bethlehem, right? He's sitting out on the hills of Bethlehem. He's watching he's watching the sheep or whatever it is he's watching. He's watching sheep, and in that solitude and in that nature and in that place, he's able to find God. And then we see, even as he is dedicated as king, he also in all this he's able to find God. And then we see he goes up against Goliath, even when with all the spirit of accusations coming against him, he goes up against Goliath, and in this battle he also finds the Lord. And then we see with this rising popularity that he finds the Lord. And now what I'm going to talk about a little bit tonight is, because I think what we see here in the rest of chapter 18 is that now David finds God in the midst of injustice. Anybody relate to that? Anybody been the victim of misjustice? I hear a lot of talk these days about prosperity and blessing, and how we find God in prosperity and blessing. And man, I am all about that. But I think we can look to the life of David and recognize that he not only found him in prosperity and blessing and in seasons of popularity, but also in the midst of injustice, he also found him. And what I want to suggest is that the injustice that characterized David's life as he rose in this season of prosperity, the jealousy that created, and the injustice that became a result of that, I think that's something we need to understand and figure out. And the church doesn't really talk a lot about injustice these days. I've seen injustice, even the last couple of weeks I've been in Sudan. I've seen injustice. I've seen injustice in East Congo. I've seen injustice in the Middle East. I've seen it terribly in India. I've seen it all over the world. But you know what? Injustice exists right here, right now. And I think sometimes the church can be really silent about that, as if the injustice is somehow predicated upon our misbehavior or something. That's what the enemy whispers to me. How about you? Well, what we're seeing is that in here in the life of David in chapter 18 is that injustice is exactly that. It is injustice. And what David learns here as he walks through this injustice is, and what he writes about later is just a real simple psalm where he says, hey, what I'm remembering in this is the Lord is my portion. The Lord is my inheritance, and he is my cup. And so what we're seeing here is that what David learned in the University of Bethlehem, what he learned out there as a sheep grazed, and what he learned as he stood against Goliath, and what he learned as he rose in popularity is the Lord is my inheritance. The Lord is my cup. He's the one who sets the standard for me. And because of that, as he began to face injustice, the real deal is there was no impact to him. I would like to think, I can remember, probably better than I want to, I can remember sometimes when I've faced at least what I thought was injustice, and I would like to report to you that it had little impact to me. And I could tell you that. Maybe I could even talk slick about it and get you to believe me, but it would be a lie. But what we're seeing here is David was so fixated on this understanding and on this truth that the Lord is my inheritance. He's my portion. He's my cup. He's so fixed on that he emerges through this injustice without fail. And so what I want to do tonight is just kind of look into this passage and see what we can get out of that we can kind of apply to our own lives. The first passage I read there, the first injustice is Saul hurls the spear at him. I will pin him to the wall, but David escaped from his presence. Why? What had David done to engender from Saul this attempt on his life? Nothing. Right? And so it's an injustice. So now Saul was afraid of David, for the Lord was with him, but he had departed Saul. The first lesson I think we can learn today is just this real simple, and that is this: you can trust in the Lord's protection. Can everybody just kind of everybody looks so serious. Can you take a deep breath and recognize we can relax? We really can trust in the Lord's presence. I travel a lot, and so one of the things I thought about the last couple weeks I traveled is this: we in America, we have become a culture that is obsessed with safety and security. Right? There were people who raised some objections to us going to South Sudan because of what they read on the internet. It's well, wake up. It's been on the internet for a long time, and we are obsessed with safety and security. And as they questioned me about this, I thought, you know what's crazy? We're going to go through Egypt. You guys shouldn't even be worried about Sudan. Egypt's where you need to worry. I didn't mention that in the meeting I had with them, but that's what I was thinking. We've become a culture that is obsessed with this. I understand. I mean, these are dangerous days. But I worry that we've become a country willing to kind of give up a lot in the way of personal freedom and personal liberties in order to obtain this illusion, really, of security. Well, what I would want to say is hey, man, hey, guys, Like, can we just all relax here? Like, and really trust in and know that the Lord protects his children? I was reminded of this while I was gone. I know some of you guys were praying. Like, I really appreciate that. I can remember so many times being places and, you know, you're a long way away and you're jet lagged and you're up in the middle of the night and it can be kind of miserable. And the thought that, you know what, there are some people like kind of my people, man, back home who are praying. Like, it really means a lot. And I think the Lord honors that. And so we had an experience that really brought this point to mind for me. We had planned, we were going to leave Sudan actually on, I'm getting my days are mixed up. We were going to leave on Thursday, and we were going to get to Cairo, Egypt on Thursday night. And we had planned to get to Cairo and to hang out in Egypt for a day. I always wanted to go see the pyramids. And so I thought, well, this is a good excuse to do it. And there were some younger guys on that team who had never been to Africa, so they wanted to do a day somewhere like that. And so we set that all up. Well, it was working out good until we took our flight out of a wheel. Remember, you called me, Jim, and he's like, look, don't go. It's just a tight connection. Well, Jim, that connection was so tight we missed it. All right? And so we came in there on Thursday. There's a guy, I had a little secret weapon. There's a guy, we call him McQueel. I guess that's his name. It doesn't, McQueel. He's at the airport. And it seems like every time I show up in Juba, the capital of Sudan, the airport's chaos, and he's always there to kind of guide us through, you know. And I don't know, some people were thinking maybe he's an angel. Maybe, but he took my $20 pretty quick. And he just, but he guides us through the airport, you know, and he kind of cuts through all the red tape. So Jim told me about the tight connection because they were coming back the same way. But I knew, buddy, I got this one in the bag. I'm not worried. Well, when the plane landed, guess who was not there? For the first time in last 3 or 4 trips, McQueel was not there. And so we had to, you know, stand in line with all the schlubs, and we got in the wrong line, and there was no help at the airport. And basically we got to the line, and we said we're ready to board this plane to go to Cairo, and they said, oh, we just closed the line. We just closed the gate. I'm like, what gate? There's no gate in Juba. Like, what gate are you talking about? They said, well, you know, the gate. I'm like, well, the airplane's right there. Door's still open. People are still getting on it. We want to get on that plane right there. And the guy was like, no. Well, I'm not used to taking no for Renee. So I said, oh, well, that's not right, man. We are here. The plane is there. And I'm trying to speak in English that he understands. We are here. The plane, it is there. And we would like to get from here to there to get on the plane with the other people. And the guy's going, no. Well, about this time, like, airport security got involved. Okay? And so the airport security comes over there, and he asks me, he speaks real good English, and he's like, what's the problem? I said, no problem. But we are here, and we want to go there. We want to get on that plane and go to Cairo. And the guy looks at the ticket agent there for Egypt Air, and he's like, what's the problem? He's like, they can't get on the plane. He's like, what is the problem? He's like, they won't let them on the plane. And the security guy's like, no, I'm demanding you let them on that plane. And this argument ensues. And I'm kind of standing back watching it. I'm thinking, I got this in the bag now because that guy's got a gun. That ticket agent's got no gun. I am on this thing, man. I am on that plane. We are going to see the pyramids. And so they argued and argued and argued. And finally, the security guy looks at me and he goes, I don't know what their deal is. I don't know what the problem is. But they will not let you on that plane. And so we literally stood there for an hour. The plane was late leaving, which I thought would work to our advantage. But we literally stood there for an hour on the tarmac and watched. And eventually the plane just flew away. And I'm thinking, this is a real bummer here. I mean, I was thinking about all day. I'm thinking about, you know, sitting by the pool. We had this hotel lined up. Hotels are really cheap in Egypt right now. So I had this 5-star hotel for $60, man. And I'm sitting at the pool overlooking the Great Pyramids. Probably going to have me a little fruity drink with an umbrella. It's going to be a big day. It's going to be fun. And instead, I end up spending the night in Juba with no shower again, and I hadn't had one in about 10 days, and I'm like, what, Lord, what are you doing? But you just kind of move, and you just kind of keep going. Well, I didn't think about it much until Saturday morning when I was back in the States, and I woke up I looked at I have a little news app on my phone, and I was taking advantage of the very fast internet I have at my house. And I was looking at the app, and the first news story that came up was Alexandria, Egypt, the city we were supposed to be in, widespread riots, 3 Americans killed. Hey guys, can we just relax, man? Like the Lord, we can trust in his protection, even when we don't know that we need it. And that's what David finds here in the midst of in the midst of this adversity and in the midst of this injustice. He finds that he can trust in the Lord's protection. I want to say, like, you know, sometimes like I go here and there and you come home with these crazy stories. Like, there is no difference between David and his ability and confidence to trust in the Lord. There's no difference between him and me. And there's no difference between me and you. Like, the Lord gave me a word. You know, I think I told you that. Like, he gave me a word. He's like, I didn't ask you to die for me, Dave. I died for you. And I will take you in and out of some places that you would think were impossible. And you can be all right. Like, he gave me this word, man. And my challenge to you is, like, what's the word he's given you? Like, I'm come on, you guys know, you know me a long time now, huh? Like, nothing special. So we all of us are his children. We can trust in his protection, and he gives us a word, both written and living, and we can trust in that. And that's what David begins to learn, and I think that's his the beginning of his story. Well, let's look and see, because there are some other injustices here in the life of David. You don't have to look very far, even just 2 verses down. And here in verse 13 it says, therefore Saul removed him from his presence. If you're jealous of somebody, you don't like them staring at you in the face all day, right? So he removes him from his presence. And it looks like at the first read here that this was kind of good news for David. It says he appointed him as his commander of 1,000. And he went out and he came in before the people. So Saul kind of gets David out of his presence, and he gives him this job as a commander of 1,000 people. Good news, right? No, bad news. Because remember earlier in the chapter, he made David in charge of all the armies of Israel. This assignment where he was reassigned was a demotion. Now he's got 1,000. He was demoted. Like, in the prime of his life, man. Right when things are cranking, right when things are moving, right when he's climbing, he's knocked off that pedestal and he gets this demotion. An injustice. Right? Why the demotion? Because he failed? No, it's an injustice. And the injustice continues here in this chapter. Look at verse 17. Then Saul says to David, here is my older daughter Merab. I'll give you her as a wife. Only be a jet lag. Be a valiant man for me and fight the Lord's battles. For Saul thought, my hand shall be against him, but my hand shall not be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him. So here we are in verse 17, and he's offered the daughter of the king. Sounds like good news, right? Wrong. Do you remember when he was fighting Goliath? The deal was whoever takes Goliath out gets the daughter of his choice. He didn't want Mary. He didn't want this one. In fact, if you kind of read it in context and do some study around it, you'll find that really what Saul's doing is setting him up. And he's kind of giving him the daughter that he knows will present a problem for him. And so, again, we see injustice. There's the injustice of this demotion, and now the injustice of not giving what he promised. And then we look down, look at verse 20, 21. So now, Michal, this is the one he wanted. Saul's daughter loved David. So he's finally going to get what he wants. He's going to get what he deserves, right? What he earned. Well, they told Saul that this thing was agreeable to him. Saul thought, I will give her to him, and so that she may become a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. another setup. And you see it in verse 25. So Saul then said, "Thus you shall say to David, the king does not desire any dowry except for 100 foreskins of the Philistines." So in other words, you can have the one you want. Just go kill another 100 of those guys and bring me their foreskins. We probably won't get into a whole lot of discussion about that. But you can have what you want. Just go kill another 100 of those guys. Well, I thought the deal was once he killed Goliath, he could have what he wanted anyway. And so in the middle of the stream now, the game's changed on him. Again, you see this. You see this injustice. And so David experienced this injustice, and my contention is that he found God in it, and he moved because he found the Lord in it. He moved to a point where it never changed him. If you read through the rest of chapter 18, you're seeing there he just continues, man. He just continues to worship. He continues to remain fixed. He continues to be successful. He just continues on in the face of this injustice. And so what I want to do tonight is there's three things I think that we can learn in all this and kind of think about with respect to injustice. The first one is this. Injustice, I think this is important enough. Number one, injustice is not from the Lord, right? You know, I was in a counseling, this just crossed my mind. I was in a counseling situation once with a little girl. She wasn't so little. Maybe she was 13, 14. That's little. And she had suffered some sexual abuse, and it was pretty rough. And you know what her mother and the church told her? They told her that God did this to her and he would use it for her. Can you imagine how screwed up that makes you thinking? Can we remember that injustice does not come from God? Can we remember that? And while we say that, though, injustice is not from the Lord, but if we will let it, it will often serve his purposes. It's not for naught. It's not coming from him, but when we experience injustice, if we'll let it, it can often serve his purposes. Does that make sense? I was reminded of that this week. Nita and Jim, you guys were in Sudan. I was reminded of this. There was the guys we work in there are part of. You ever heard of the Lost Boys? Okay, so there was a lot of the Lost Boys. They were from this area in Sudan. We go to a place called. It won't make any difference to you. We go to an extreme kind of northwest corner of South Sudan. The place it's around a town called Awil. The people group there is Dinka. And so these were the guys back in the mid-'90s, I think it was, earlier '90s, when the Arab raiders came in. A lot of these guys, they were cattle farmers. They came in, they stole their cows, they killed a lot of their parents, and this group of boys began to walk across the southern part of Sudan, right? And so they were walking across. It took them 3 months. They walked across Sudan. No parents, no guidance. About a third of them died on the way. They died because they died of thirst. They died because lions got them. And about a third of them died, and the other 2/3 made it all the way to Ethiopia. Their idea was they would get to Ethiopia and they would find the leader of this new emerging rebel movement, and he could arm them so that they could go back to their homeland and avenge the death of their parents. Right? So they're in Egypt, and they kind of take up residence in a refugee camp there, and then the Egyptian government, not Egypt, I'm jet lagged. They were in Ethiopia. The Ethiopian government, under pressure from the northern government in Sudan, they expelled them from the country. So now they're wandering around again. Another portion of them die, and they finally land in Kenya. And so now about half of them are left, and they're there in Kenya. They've experienced this incredible tragedy, but they're there to find this rebel leader and arm themselves and go avenge their parents. And so the rebel leader shows up. He was in America. We don't know this guy. His name was John Garang. He was actually educated in the U.S. He has a PhD in history, and he patterned that movement, that whole movement. He patterned it after the revolutionary movement in our own country. And he's a historian, and he went back, after getting his PhD from UCLA, he went back to South Sudan to be a farmer. But the Arabs kept stealing his tractors. And so he began to protect himself, and this whole movement encouraged around him. Well, he was an African leader who, unlike most, did not believe in child soldiers, right? And so all these kids, hundreds, maybe thousands, are sitting in front of him, ready to go to war. And what Garang tells them is, I'm telling you, no, we will not arm you. Don't pick up a gun. Pick up a pencil. Study. You will be the leaders of this next generation, of the new Sudan. And Garang's a believer, or was before he died. I don't, never more a prophetic statement, because these guys that we work with walked back in their village, not with after being educated. They walked back in their village another 3 months, not with guns but with Bibles, and launched in true apostolic fashion. And they launched a new church movement there, because it was mainly animistic at that point. And now there are hundreds, if not thousands, of churches because of these 3 or 4 guys. And so I'm understanding all that. And we were there to work in their little town, and we were working alongside what do you call it? Like an orphanage. We're working alongside an orphanage and school that is there. There's 135 kids, and they are there because they, most of them are either orphans or they are redeemed slave children from the north. And while we were there, we were working with these, and I heard my buddy there is a guy named Santino, and as he got up and talked, he was telling them, like, what the enemy meant for harm, God will use for good. And he was telling them, study. You will be the new leaders of Sudan. And what I started to realize is, like, this injustice that David faced, see, God didn't send it, but he was able to use it. It fashioned David into the leader that he was really called to be. This injustice that Santino and Peter and a young attack experienced, God didn't send it, but he uses it. And see, the injustice that you face in your life, God didn't send it. It's not from him. But he really wants to use it, shaping you and I into the leaders that we're supposed to be. He really wants to use it to instill in us a heart for people who are experiencing injustice and really don't have the perspective we do, and so don't know how to deal with it. Is that making sense? Point number 1 about injustice we see in the life of David, and I think that we can apply it ourselves. Point number 2 is this one, and I think we have to be careful of this one. Be careful at this point. But point number 2 is this. With injustice comes pain, right? And the most automatic, natural human response to pain, to this, is to find comfort, right? I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking, okay, so let me say it simply. With injustice, when I come into the face of injustice, like it hurts, right? If it didn't hurt, we really wouldn't even see it as unjust. When I come into the face of injustice, what I see is, excuse me, what I experience, what I experience is hurt. And my most natural response to that is to seek comfort, to seek relief from that pain. Is that right? Well, for Santino and the Lost Boys, their automatic response was, let's go get guns and take up arms against these people who have killed our parents and raped our villages, and let's get revenge. And the thought was, this revenge will somehow bring us comfort, right? Some people, there's kind of the fight or flight here. Like, sometimes we seek comfort in something like that, or other times we just seek comfort in the more of a flight mode, right? It's like, I'll just drink it away. Like, I'm not a teetotaler, but I'm going to tell you, alcohol's a problem. And what we see is that our response to injustice and pain sometimes is to fight, and sometimes it's flight, and we can, pick your poison, but that's just. And so hear me. Here's what I want. Here's what I'm trying to say. If when we experience injustice, and consequently that pain, if we take matters into our own hands, we will thwart what purposes the Lord is going to bring out of that. Like, believe it or not, I really believe that for you and I, for David, for you and I, some of the injustice that we face, while it is not from him, there is blessing for us in it. Right? And if we cannot take matters into our own hands, then that won't be thwarted. That's what we see David doing, not taking these matters into his own hands. And maybe we could agree that doing it his way is where we really will find comfort in the pain of that injustice. See, here's the deal. Even in the face of injustice, there's some things we can know, right? In the face of injustice, I can still know I am his. In the face of injustice, I can know that he'll handle that. Like nothing escapes his attention. Maybe nobody else has even seen it. Maybe nobody else has even heard it. Maybe I've not even told anybody else about this particular injustice. But you know what? I can still know that he can handle that. He'll take care of it. And that I'm his, and that there is purpose in it, and that he loves us. See, nothing changes that. And so this is the truth, no matter what the injustice. And my point is this: as we can take it into our own hands, or we can do it his way, which in effect is aligning our thoughts with truth, knowing that our emotions will follow. Does that make sense? Like I'm a feeler, right? Like I'm kind of, if I'm doing the Myers-Briggs, I'm an INFP. I'm an intuitive feeler. But like, can we understand that like our emotions don't dictate truth? And then if we will align, instead of taking things in our own hands, if we will align our minds and understanding with truth, then our emotions will eventually follow. I think that's why these days the word is so important. We live in, not just in Sudan, not just in China, we live in a world that's full of injustice. We live in a world these days that's full of pain. Like, can we say, like, it ain't Sunday school no more? Anybody else sensing a change in the last 4 or 5 years? Sunday school's over, man. And there was a day in Sunday school where I would read my Bible every day, or I would try to, and even when I didn't, I would lie about it, so I could get a little check in the box and get a gold star. Like, it ain't about that anymore, buddy. Sunday school's over. There's a lot of pain in our own lives, and there's a lot of injustice in our own lives, and there's a lot around us. And if we're not bathing in the Word to align our beings with and our minds with truth, we're in trouble. It's not about Sunday school and performance. It's not about, I'm going to read my Bible so I can go to church and be holy. And everybody think I'm cool. Like, it's not like that. It's survival. And I mentioned that thought. We got to constantly be taking captive the enemy's thoughts, or the enemy's strategy, and the things he whispers in our ear. And there's no way for us to do that if we don't align ourselves with truth. And if we will experience that, not solely, but certainly in the midst of injustice, in the midst of pain, when we're just seeking comfort. Is that making sense? So that's the second thing. Well, the last one is this. I mentioned it earlier. It's out of Psalms. I don't know, maybe David wrote this psalm as he's thinking about injustice and as he's understanding that. It's Psalm 16:5. He says this: "The Lord is my portion." Excuse me. "The Lord is the portion of my inheritance, my cup. Thou dost support my lot." In Sudan, I'm thinking Sudan because I was just there. In Sudan, they say it this way. You never know that Jesus is all you need until Jesus is all you got. Right? In the midst of this adversity, in the midst of this injustice, David begins to understand he's really all I got. Now, it was no more true than before in this time of prosperity and popularity. But in the midst of that injustice, he begins to really see it, and he begins to understand, and he writes, it's the Lord really who is my portion. It's the Lord really who's my inheritance. And even if this season of jealousy-induced rage and anger, even if that continues and it comes at me, even when I'm demoted, even when I am denied the love of my life, this thing that I worked so hard for, even in the midst of all that, even if that remains to be the case, I know the Lord is my portion. Like, guys, I think that's really where we got to be. There was an Old Testament word, I'm sure that David would know. There was an Old Testament passage, an Old Testament reference to the name of God. Have you ever studied the names of God? It's really cool. Like, these names of God reflect who he is, reflect his character, all that. You know the one I like the best? It's El Shaddai. Remember the old Amy Grant song? I could sing it for you. Let me go ahead. El Shaddai, El Shaddai, something, something, Adonai. Age to age, you're still the same by the power of your name. Proverbs says, I like that song, even though I didn't like that genre too much, but I like the words of that song. You know, in Proverbs, it's like the name of the Lord is a strong tower, and the righteous will run to it. It's like the name of the Lord, who he is, what he is, his character, like that we can count. And the righteous, they're not trusting in chariots and horses. They're not trusting in the weapons of warfare. They're running to that. They're running to him. And so this word El Shaddai, you know what it means in Hebrew literally? I'm going to catch you off guard. No, that's the connotation is that literal meaning, breasted one. The picture is a nursing mother. Right? Now, we had kids. There's no kids at my house right now. Praise the Lord. But I remember when they were younger, and I remember those 2 o'clock feedings. You were around. We were in Cleveland then. I remember that. And I used to love getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning with joy and going, gosh, if there was some way I could help, I would. And then rolling over and going back to sleep. And that baby, whichever one it was, and all 3 of them did it, who were screaming in the middle of the night as they, and like this is the picture you're seeing in this word El Shaddai. It's as that baby comes to the breast of its mother, everything's okay. See, David understood it. The Lord is my portion. The Lord's my inheritance. He's my lot in life. And because I really do know him as El Shaddai, all-sufficient one, because I really do know him as that, like I can rest on his chest, on his breast, and everything's okay. I was always like, when I would lay there at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd be like, I can't help her, and God bless you, honey, and I'd be like, hurry and get in there, because I knew as soon as she got there, that crying would just, and I could go on back to sleep. Hey guys, tonight my thought is, I just think that it's not unusually characteristic of just this body. It's just, I think, characteristic of the day we're in. I think that a lot of us have faced injustice. And I think that we really need to align our minds with truth. I think we need to not only align our minds with truth, but I think we really need to come into deeper revelation and deeper relationship with El Shaddai. And I think as we align ourselves with this truth, like he did, as we really come to a knowledge of El Shaddai, like he did in the hills of Bethlehem, as we do that, then the injustices that we face, we can give to him, and he really will use them, not only for us, but for other people as well.